I'm going to change this up. It's showing a control horn in the center. I'll have a control horn, but it'll be integral to the stab. It'll be a metal slider horn. And then I'm going to take these hinges here on the inboard side and slide them over. Now the plans call out for a Dubro hinge. I'm going to go with the Dubro hinges. Now if you have an electric, I think it's important that you have a really free hinge. So you might pull the pins out of the Dubro hinge and put a smaller pin in there to keep them nice and free. I think I got what I need. I've got a lot of tools. They're homemade. This is a little hook tool I made. It's just an X-Acto blade. I used a Dremel to put a hook on it. This is a homemade handle for a, looks like a different type of hinge slotting tool. It's got a hook on it. I think this is a Goldberg hook, and I just brazed it on a wire. This is a saw. This comes in handy. And I've got two different forks, one of them for a normal sized Dubro and then one for a small hinge. The center finder. This is a homemade fork for the bigger hinges. They're like a cleat hinge, more like a big RC quarter scale hinge. Brazed on. This was scrap metal I brazed onto a music wire. This is a nice little tool. It's got a hook on it. It's got a ground out little bevel in there with a Dremel tool. It's sort of like dished out like a spoon, brought to a sharp edge. And I use this to gouge out leading edges of flaps or elevators. And this allows the horn to be inset in the wood, like that. So let's just say this was the control horn. So let's say there's, of course, a bend on it like this. The control horn would go in a hole. You know, right here, go in a hole. But see how that allows it to recess into your control surface. So what I do, take the elevator here, sand it, and make sure it's nice and straight. So you want to start out before you put a bevel on it with a nice straight edge. Once I get the edge lined up, got it good and straight, I'll run this center finding tool. This is an old Goldberg center finding tool. It's got a little nib on the center of it. And the trick is you rotate this thing and then you drag it. And it scribes the center line. The only thing you got to remember when you're doing this, you have to keep these ears twisted so it makes contact with your stab, and that gives you a nice straight center line. And double check it, make sure it didn't wander off center. Becomes obvious. Now the stab, you do the same thing. I'll true the stab up, make sure the trailing edge is straight. same thing here. Now the mistake I made on this stab, it's okay now, it's usable, but I accidentally put the bevel on the stab, not the elevator, so see if we can get it right this time. So I got a new sanding block here. It's got some fresh paper. This is I believe 80 grit. I like to take a bar and I sandwich this thing down, overhang the bench, and then I'll actually just sand it in there. It takes a little doing, but once you get it down, it's okay. It's not the best method, but it works. Go slow at first. Basically, I'm just eyeballing a 45. I'm not getting too worried about it. And once you get going, keep double checking it, see where you're at with that line. And you don't want to sand into the line, you want to sand just a little bit away from it, maybe. I've got a sander, it's on a track. It'd be good for this stuff, but if you don't have it and you're careful, you can just go ahead and do it by hand. So once you get your center line marked here, and then you have your little tick mark there for the hinge location, I like to lay it out like this, get lined up. Rotate it. You got to make sure you're staying the center. That's the hardest part. Just take your time, keep eyeballing it, and make sure that it's in line. Now obviously, if you have 6-pound wood, it's going to go a lot easier than if you have 8 or 12, at least with this method here. And of course the hinge here is not put in there because I'm going to actually have a control horn attached to the stab. Don't need a hinge there. Now the horn they had was a plastic RC horn, so you needed the stabilization of the hinge. Now this tool, I like to use the little saw. I don't know what they call it, a hole saw or key saw. I think it's an X-Acto product. And I sort of just clean my way through the hole. Just work my way down. Make sure my little tick mark lines up to the center there. Now the next step, this little tool is made up to sand notches in this elevator. So the way this little tool works, this little sandpaper on this piece of wood is raised up the same amount as the diameter of this hinge barrel. And of course the back of the sanding pad extends out past the pad. And this is your depth stop. So once the side of this tool bottoms out, you're as deep as you need to be. Now, this isn't my idea. There's it goes way back. I don't know, I think in the 90s, or some of this stuff goes back to the as long as the hinges have been around, I think. So I line this thing up. Got a little tick mark there for center. I line it up like that. The way I get this started, I only do one corner at a time. If you try to flatten it out and do the whole notch, it ends up sliding all over the place. So I tilt it, I get it started, and then I actually flatten it out, and then I finish sanding. So Stunhanger, other sites, they have demos on hinges that are different than these. These are tab hinges. So this is what was on the plan, so this is what we're going to build it with because they're readily available. And the only drawback to these hinges is they're a little stiff. Now, for an IC motor, I don't think it matters, but when you start doing this electric stuff, you got to have control surfaces that are 100% free. And I mean, when it's sitting there, it'll fall under its own weight. You can't have any friction. So if I have to, I might pull this hinge pin out. You know, I might have to install a new one. I might go with a different diameter. I might clean this up a little bit, or whatever I have to do to make this 100% non-stick. I got to do that. So here's a quick tutorial here. If you go to this address here, danwinship.smugmug.com, it'll bring up the gallery. And there's different chapters or different galleries within the gallery here. So what you want to do is find one of these and click on it. Double click, double left click, and that'll bring up all the photos in that gallery. You can scroll through here and look at these different pictures. Now if you get to one of these photos and you want to download it, if you hover over the picture, you're going to see a little arrow right here in the bottom right hand corner of the picture, and that'll be your download. And let's say that you click on a picture, double click, it brings it up into another window, which you can see full size. You can stretch this out and full screen. So I don't get any money out of this site. I pay to have it put up, but up here you can actually buy the prints. If you click on here, you can buy, you know, these photos. These photos are a high enough resolution where you can get some really large prints out of them if you wanted to. And you got options. I don't know if you can get coffee mugs or not. So a lot of that stuff is pretty pricey, but if you get on this page here, you can come over to this download arrow right here too. Right there. And I think this button here does the same as what you hovered on originally on top of the smaller picture. This button here, if you wanted to share it or send it to somebody that might be interested in it, you can click on this button and that'll bring up a bunch of social media sites, you know, so you can either link to it or embed it in your copy there. So that's all there is to it. It's really simple, easy to navigate. Just pick a gallery, click on it. You can scroll through them. So even if you don't download a photo or if you don't buy anything, at least stop by, take a look at what's on here. Downloads are all free. You just click on it and it'll give you a full resolution picture to do whatever you want with it. Right there, danwinship.smugmug.com. So stop on by and take a look.